Hello. Oh, okay, it works. Thank you, Ross, and thank you for being here, Alex. This is a real treat. I've only gotten to interview him once before, and it was at this one of the world's biggest advertisers. I can't name the name because it was an NDA, but it was a panel of some of the most important, powerful people, smartest people in the industry, and Alex was the center of it, and everybody was staring at him. So he, in my opinion, is the closest thing to a legitimate rock star on Madison Avenue. But at the height of it, you decided to leave about 6 years ago. And listening to the conversation here this morning, I was thinking your time was brilliant because the business is really crazy now. But you're going to fix it. So part of your, we'll talk a little bit about your current business and your ventures, but you wrote a piece for us recently that kind of sparked this conversation about the concept of brand tech. And one of our other contributors, Dave Morgan, has written a little bit about how he believes brand tech will eat ad tech's lunch. And I thought it'd be nice to start off just by you defining how you see brand tech. What is the opportunity here, and how does it differ from the current state of ad tech?
Okay. I wish I had more answers for people about where things are going, because I did get out about 6 years ago. And what I'd like to do when I was in the industry is every year I'd like have a theme, and then I'd try to, push that theme and see if I could change the business. And I usually thought, okay, we're going to go this way now. We're going this way. It's all digital, whatever it was. And I was definitely like out of ideas. Was one of the reasons why I was getting out.
I doubt that.
Well, it just was getting more and more difficult and less fun. In part because my clients were huge too, which wasn't as much fun. So I probably won't have like too many answers on where on where it needs to go now, but maybe a few. The brand tech, to me, everyone's got a slightly different definition of it. I think of brand tech as sort of like really simple ways to technology that makes it simple to plug into the ad tech stack. Right. So in my mind, it doesn't eat ad tech. It just makes it more accessible for more people. I think that if you look at an app doesn't make what's happening in the background go away. It just works on top of it. And I think the same thing would be true going forward with brand tech.
Okay. So listening to the conversation here this morning, I know you weren't here, but I start to worry that maybe we just have too much stuff in this business and in this world. We have too many ways of reaching consumers. We have too many media options for people. And you're going to bring another one to the market now. So are we just going to fragment ourselves into infinitesimal little slices of life? I mean,
oh man, that's like a pretty heavy question to ask. By the way, I'm not a media person. I'm a creative guy. Right, so
you have to message to all those little slices.
Yeah, well, in my mind, so like some of my favorite brands would be, Fly and YT and I don't know, Transition. Do you know any of those brands?
No, I don't.
You never will, right? So, and because everyone, there being more is really doesn't change what we're like as humans, right? So we can only, what's the stat? If you look at the military, they won't put together groups of people more than 100.
Right.
Because if there's in your own life, 100 people that you might die for, right? After that, they're acquaintances. And I think the same thing is true for human beings and brands. We only have so much bandwidth. So whether there's more or less, it doesn't change who you are and how you're going to operate as a human being. What's happening, though, is more and more we're able to interact with the brands that we care the most about and not interact with the ones that probably are really ancillary to us. So I don't see that much advertising for Tide detergent anymore, right? Because I kind of made my detergent decisions a while back, and I'm good on that. And I'm sure everybody is beginning. It's just the beginning, because I still see a lot of stuff. I'm like, why am I seeing this? And that was one of the things that I noticed with programmatic video when we started Brandzuka was, why am I seeing the Chevy ad over and over and over? I'm trying to look at 20 different videos online, and I keep getting the same ad. And in fact, I just bought a Chevy, right? So clearly, they're not using the technology that's really available, and somehow either there isn't access for smaller players, or the bigger players are just eating all the inventory, and we didn't know which it was. But that was sort of the big question when we started. Is like, why can't little guys access this so that people can see what really interests them?
Okay, so yeah, paradox of choice, long tail principles. We all like our brands. We don't all have to like the same brands. But so when I started out at Adweek, probably about the time that you were employee number 17, there were 200 brands that we were covering at Adweek magazine in the early 80s. And today, there's probably 3 million plus brands, if you define a brand that way. Havas has this great study where they survey people around the world, and they found that 72% of brands around the world, consumer could live with tomorrow if it went away. In the United States, 92% of brands could go away tomorrow, and most consumers wouldn't care. So the point is, we have many, many, many more choices. So I just want to come back to this point.
I would have to see that study because it seems like something Havas would say.
All right.
Right?
You could take shots, sure.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, like that's something Havas would say. But did they mean some of the brands that I care a lot about, but you don't care about? I'd have to look at how they did the study. And when I was first in advertising, employee number 17, we had a stat which was, on average, the average American sees 3,000 ads a day.
Right.
And there was no internet, right? There was TV and outdoor and magazines and stuff, and it added up. I'm sure now does anyone know what the...
It's 8,000 today.
It's only 8,000.
Well, so...
It should be like 80,000. Doesn't it feel like
gets to be how
if
you
it was 3,000 before there was an internet?
It gets to be how you define a brand impression, but using classical definitions of an ad impression, it's 8,000 according to Nielsen. But nobody knows the real number, right? I mean,
so in whatever that 30 years, it's more than doubled, but it seems pretty reasonable to me. If it was 8,000 before the internet, or it's 3,000 now, it's 8,000. That's not that bad.
J. Walter Thompson
I think we can deal with it. Also, turn of the century. The reason why they invented Coca-Cola and other elixirs was because there was a nervousness that human beings had because the pace of society in 1901 was too fast for the human brain to deal with. So, the question is, it's a question that's been around for a while, at least 116 years. I'm sure it goes back before that, when they first invented the wheel, they're like, oh, dude, back it up. This is faster than we can go. Anyway. Remember they thought we'd die if you went over 60 miles an hour? That was a thing. We're going to be okay.
Yeah. And I think they thought the world was flat, too. But
no, they thought we'd die around turn of the century. Like, when cars, they were like, if you go over faster than a horse could run 40, they were like around 60, the human being might not be able to survive. And then speed of sound, they thought Chuck Yeager would blow apart. These are good arguments.
These are
solid media arguments.
And tremendous industry insights, too.
Yeah.
But I just want to get back to your model in particular. So this is not a new trick. I mean, companies as big as Google and Microsoft and even WPP tried to fund a startup that would empower the entire long tail, any mom and pop shop, to have the same access to creativity and media that any big brand had, and that's what you're trying to do now. So why is it going to work now, and why didn't it work before?
I don't know why it didn't work before. I know that there's. My guess would be, because I can't speak to what happened and what their intentions were and where they maybe would have changed, but definitely for us, it's very difficult to stay sort of on target, right? If you want to serve the long tail, it's constantly the pressures of revenue have you moving towards agencies as customers. And so as you go that direction and become more of enterprise software, you lose the other, the coffee shop owner can't figure it out. Right. So we've, and Achilles, who's in the back, has done a really good job, I think, at toggling back and forth a little bit, but always coming back to that simple solution, because our belief is the simplest things are always the things that win, right? But simple's not easier. It's actually much, much harder. And so what's worked about the toggling is at times, having agencies and professionals for clients is that we can take that insight and say, okay, we need it to work for you as well. We need it to work on this level. We need you to have brand safety and things like that. But we want to do it in a way where it doesn't confuse somebody who's coming in off the street with a small brand who just wants to take advantage of the fact that these are the same pipes that big advertisers are able to plug into.
Okay, so just one more time on contributing.
Answer the damn question?
No.
Oh.
But no, I'm seriously concerned. I feel like there's
Yeah.
more information I could possibly manage. But you're going to create that much more because you're going to unlock the long tail. You're going to allow that many more brands to exist in the world, right? I mean,
I'm definitely in favor of more brands.
but we're having a hard time managing the number we have.
You've got this
now.
one data point, which is this Havas report that says we could do without all these brands. I haven't read it. You'd have to give it to me. But
Yeah.
200 brands, when you covered 200 brands, there were way more than 200 brands. Probably none of my clients at that same time were on your list of 200 brands.
Right.
So I think that, again, I think that this has existed for a long time. And to me, I don't look at it as creating more brands. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go into business now that I can do programmatic advertising. People go into business because they've got a dream. There's something that compels them to be crazy enough to start something new. And I love that. I mean, that's what love to spend my time with, people who are that crazy. But I don't think that the opportunity to advertise as well as a larger advertiser is going to compel those people to do those startups. Also, for me, employee number 17, little agency in Miami, third best agency in Miami, which puts you way down the list of agencies that matter in the world. We weren't on that list, right? And we really couldn't compete with New York agencies when it came to production. And then along came the Apple computer, right? And that basically gave us all the tools that if you had the talent, you could do all the same things that big New York agencies did. And suddenly it kind of leveled the playing field. Without that computer, there's no Crispin Porter Bogusky. Like, it didn't happen. We didn't, rise up out of Miami to become a national force.
So those same tools exist in the world today. They just haven't been organized in a way that enables that long tail to do that, and that's what you're doing.
I don't like awesome stuff just in the hands of like a select few people who can afford it. I mean, I've never really liked that.
Okay, so
Do you like that? I'm kidding you.
it creates economic disruption that can be good. I mean, look, we just went through this process in the last couple of weeks. Let's talk about a category, politics. So that's a great example of.
Does everyone want to talk politics?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, Trump is kind of the new establishment brand, and he used media and technology in a way that the established brands couldn't in that category.
You know what was funny? I don't want to talk politics, but the election, there's when you saw Obama come in, right, and he had a lot of really interesting people who worked with him and who were, kind of bringing in a new approach to technology and grassroots, and those people. I mean, how many? It's like any great campaign. How many people do you meet that take credit for that Obama digital campaign, right? It's like every other person did that, right? You can't find anyone who did the Hillary campaign right now, and it's the exact same people.
Right.
It was the exact
Right.
same people.
Interesting. Well,
But I bet they leave it off their resume. That's all I'm saying.
okay, so is there any insight, even though you like having new opportunities, new options, do you have any advice for the establishment, for the established brands, what they could do better to manage and defend themselves from no barrier to entry, basically?
Well, I think if you look at programmatic, the established brands really use it the way they have to use it. They just buy it in bulk. and they do the same thing they would do with broadcast, which is they're okay with enormous amounts of waste. Because they can't get the numbers to a point where it makes sense without that waste, and they're used to it from television anyway. So I don't know if I have advice on what to do. Eventually, they'll be able to refine those buys. They can do tighter, more effective buys. They could spend less money there and get better results. But I don't think they really care right now.
Okay. So I guess the biggest knock against ad tech so far, and presumably brand tech too, would be that it hasn't really done a great job of creativity. You were certainly a very progressive, innovative, at least tried to do some different things with digital media. What do you think the problem's been? Why have we not really had great creative executions at scale?
I just don't follow it enough to know if that's
Okay.
true. So that's the question that I was like, I don't know if I can answer that. Maybe go on to the next one.
Okay.
I feel like people are doing
Oh, that
great.
was the question.
Yeah,
Okay.
people are doing great work, I think. And I imagine that if I was really geeking out on advertising and digital campaigns right now, I'd probably be able to answer with, well, I love this and I love this and I love this, but I haven't been following it.
Okay, so some years back, I was meeting with the people at Visible World who do all of the television versioning and addressable TV, and they told me off the record, so this is the first time I'm saying this publicly, that they were discussing the idea of doing versioning during the Super Bowl with you. And no, not true.
Nope.
Okay. So the follow-up there is, do you think this is something that could be applied in a Super Bowl environment, with a really big mass audience where you could version creative on the fly, or is that a completely different animal?
So you're saying because you can buy programmatic and you could buy television in a programmatic way, what would you do with the Super Bowl?
Correct.
It's really interesting because I probably, at least for a while, wouldn't do that because there's the benefit of the Super Bowl. There's a few events that are sort of these, big fireside moments that we as humanity still have. It used to be every night, prime time, everyone would come into the office and the water cooler and you could talk about the same things. Now you don't have that anymore because of the way people watch, and you haven't had it for a long time. I think one of the things that makes the Super Bowl special is you still have that, right? So I probably would you'd have to come up with a really good reason to break that, and or do it in a way where it added to that sort of campfire thing, right? So more people talked about it because you were really curious what version other people got, and made sure that everyone knew that you'll have to work together to figure this out or something like that. Game that up a little bit. So it's doable, but I probably wouldn't think it's the most valuable thing you get out of Super Bowl right now. So
it's been 6 years. Why are you coming back? I mean, did you miss the business, or?
Oh my God, I
Yeah.
so much missed it. And no, I don't feel like I'm back. I just am doing. I started doing angel investing.
Right.
Through that I've invested in 3 little agencies, and a bunch of companies as well. And when you start to do angel investing, you start to think, oh, it'd be neat to have a little fund. Mm-hmm. So I met a guy at a Foundry Group. And together we created a fund called Batshit Crazy Ventures. And I get good deal flow, I think, within the ad tech and the brand tech world. So I have invested in some things there, yeah.
And it's been mainly local Colorado type businesses?
No, it's national, but we love doing local Colorado stuff because our favorite thing is very early, very hands-on. Like a Branzuca is a good example where we talk to Achilles every day,
right.
and work on it from the time there were 0 customers, right? So that's just more fun for me. It reminds me of being a creative director. I'm trying to recreate. So what I do miss about the creative,
Sure.
going from being a creative director, which is a kind of paid insanity, right? You think about things in 15-minute chunks, right? And then move on, and then move on, and then move on. Then you go back into the real world. I tried to take a job helping Al Gore on climate, and I'd go into the same place every day, and I could take it, but only for a couple of years. And I think that what this
So it was
does,
not sustainable.
it's not. Yeah, don't. it didn't. Yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work for me. I have ADD, right? And if you're a creative director, that's actually a job requirement.
All right. So on that note, I'll shift to another topic. So one of my favorite things about the business is like there's actually a lot of culture in the industry that's around, geography, communities. One of the things that when I started Adweek with the founder of MediaPost, Ken Fadner, it was a hyper-local magazine. We published, New York, East Coast, West Coast, Texas editions. We never did a Colorado edition, but so I want to ask you, what is it that's special about this community here? Why did you move from Miami to make this your home? And what is the essence of Colorado, really, from your point of view? That makes
Well,
it special?
I always thought that I didn't want my kids to go through junior high in Miami
Right.
because it's kind of a shit show.
What
And
worked out for you?
so I didn't want this for them. So basically I had still control of the agency. We were in the middle of a earn out, and I thought, okay, now's the time to move. Went to my partners, and it was purely lifestyle. Like I thought, okay, something out here, better schools, wouldn't have to do private school, could do public school, all those sorts of things, right? And then I got out here, and we started with the idea we were going to take 20 people. And then that wound up being 400, and I think it grew to about 750 out here at one point. But we came for the lifestyle. But the thing that was really awesome coming from Miami, the biggest article the Miami Herald ever wrote on CPB was when we left. Yeah. And the New York Times, we would get 100 times as much coverage in the New York Times as in the Miami Herald. That's like the Miami business community just sort of distilled this kind of self-loathing, experts are from out of town sort of thing. And then you get to Boulder, and the mayor's office wanted to meet with me. I'm like, well, that's crazy, right? And then the mayor's office is like, they sit down, they said, look, we're not looking for any new businesses in Boulder. And I was like, oh. And they said, but yours is a creative industry, and we love creativity here. We really value that, so we're excited about you coming. And what I found is like the business community in Colorado, I think it's like this in Denver too, it's certainly like this in Boulder, is even people who are in the same category who are direct competitors will help each other out. And that is the biggest surprise and the reason why I don't want to leave.
So it
It's
is a
what
real
keeps me
community.
here. It is really, really strong. It's really amazing.
All right, well, thanks for hosting MediaPost. We'll be back. I'd like to turn it over to the community if you have any questions for one of your own. It's a real treat to have Alex at any MediaPost event, but especially here in town.
I miss the advertising people. It's the people I miss, Joe.
And the free drinks.
While they think
I actually, I do miss the people because there's not many industries with like this many really bright people.
yeah, they seem to be paying attention though. I don't see any ADD people out here, but
These are media people.
oh, there you go. So while they think of some questions, let me ask you. I mean, we're spending a lot of time at MediaPost now obsessing on some new technologies in a way we didn't before: IoT, VR, AI. I mean, are you getting excited about this stuff, or do you see that as just another bright, shiny thing? Do you think these things have potential to really change the way brands communicate with consumers?
I mean, I get excited about all this stuff. I don't. Some of it is a little bit closer in where I've got a good sense, or a fair sense of where I'd like to see it go. Other things like VR, AR, I kind of see more potential for AR than VR. But AR, I have friends who are really working hard on it and trying to figure it out, and I know that they're really struggling with it. It's a very, very different sort of storytelling medium. Take all the technical away from it, just like how do you use it, and what works for people and what doesn't. It's super difficult. But yeah, I get excited. I mean, now's a crazy cool time to be alive. I'm actually more bummed that I'm gonna die, than like worried about like, oh, I like this, I don't like this. I mean, I only have maybe 50 years left, maybe. So it's kind of a bummer, you know. For me, you guys are young, you'll be all right.
Wow, what a downer note.
No, I'm really down about the whole dying thing.
Well, there's theories that technology might actually.
I could live forever
Yeah.
with my rate of income and modern technology. Yeah. That I don't think I'm so hot on either, though. Like, here's my theory. Immortality is going to get figured out right when I'm like 85 or 90, you know? And then I can lock that shit in, my 90-year-oldness. And then all the people who, you know, locked it in, they're like, there's one of the guys that just barely made it.
We have a question.
Hey, hi. I'm in sales. I completely have ADD too because I'm in sales. I'm Jenny. I work for a company called Verve. I could tell you about that if you want to learn. Anyway, my question for you is: in this world of like really fast-paced technology, multiple platforms, multiple devices, mobile first is kind of what I believe. What creative vehicle do you think, you know, is really the strongest way for a brand to reach a consumer at this present moment? And you talked a little bit about augmented reality in the future, and yeah, Pokemon Go, you know, had a lot of impact. But what, from a creative perspective, when the tools that are, you know, being out there developing creative ideas for brands, what one do you think is most impactful today for a brand to engage with the consumer?
I think video. You know, I mean, if you look at, I like to step back and just see, you know, what's happened historically with other aspects of sort of online media, and you know, it starts with text, moves to images, and you know, it's moving to video. You know, after that there'll be something else too, but I feel like you could put your bet on video for a while to continue to just, you know, be more and more ubiquitous. I think it's a great, you know, we know how to tell stories in it. Like there's an enormous generation that it comes very second nature to. So the number of good storytellers is just, you know, going like this. The you know, options for places to tell those stories is going like this. The issue as a if you're in the business is the sort of, you know, downward pressure on margins, right? So as all these things become more democratized, you know, there's enormous pressure on margin. So I'd rather be a platform than in video production right now. Yeah.
Another question right here. Just tell us who you are.
Hi, Kathy Norford. I work with Spawn Ideas. I'm based here, but our agency is based in Anchorage. It's another lifestyle place you could check out. There you go. So Joe's doing a fantastic job communicating with you, but I'm curious, you know, we talk about the harm of silos. So from media people to talk with creatives, I guess I'd love your thoughts on how to best do that.
How to get people talking together?
Yeah, exactly. Eliminate
I mean,
the
there's different
silos.
structures that are good for that. You know, there are structures where there's a pod, and I don't know how you're structured, but in that pod, the media person sits inside that pod with the, you know, creative people and the account people. So our thing was always to get media in the room as early as possible. So the original sort of meetings with the client and the early briefings that occur, you'd want to have media there. So, you know, our business was, you fly somewhere, you all drive back together, you all talk about everything, right? And so if you don't have a media person there, you can't really start that. We were hardcore into the notion that we hated clients that didn't let us do their media. So we were I don't know what they're like now, but I was the worst guy for like a big media company to work with our agency. We absolutely hated it. And because we know that their buys include a lot of crap that they're just trying to get off on, you know, pawn off on somebody. And you know, we really integrated the creative and the media in a way where it was difficult for us to take those kind of plans and those kind of buys and do anything effective with it. In a more siloed world, doesn't matter that much. But the way we tried to work it was really, really hard. So does anyone even want to get rid of the silos, though? I thought the whole thing was like, when I was in the business, it was like media, it spun off all the agencies, and there were these enormous media companies. I think that's still what's going on, right?
Consolidation is, media's coming back in-house in full service.
It
There's
is?
the value there.
Really?
I think the collaboration,
That's exciting.
it is exciting, and I think with digital, there's more communication more frequently with creative. So it's just, we talked this morning about selling your ideas to creative and
Yeah.
how media, how we just need to talk. So
I'm old enough that I remember when this is how we made money as an agency, was media and commissions on media. Creative was free, everything was
Right.
free.
15%.
There was 15% on media.
I don't know, I still hear all the time that production is the margins. So that hasn't changed.
Production. We would also push through production at cost. Like media was the only place we made money, and every agency was like that in the early days. Now sometimes we'll take Branzuca to an agency and say, hey, you could mark this up, new profit center, and they literally don't know that there was a time where that was a profit center, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah, they have a new one. It's called Kickbacks. Anyway, sorry.
Is that what they use now? Okay, Achilles, take note of that.
I think we got another question here and one more in the back.
Hey, Michael Centro, talking about video. What is your sentiments on Snapchat?
I don't use Snapchat, so I think that it's really neat. And no, I'm kidding. I actually don't use it. It's not a platform I'm on, and my son's on it. He's 20. A lot of the young people I'm around are using pretty much Snapchat exclusively, and are shutting their Facebook off. And so I just in the last few days I've thought Snapchat might be it. Like it could be the next giant thing. And hopefully during this election everyone else has turned their Facebook off too, and we'll need a place to go.
And the Twitter account, too.
I got a Twitter account.
No, I'm saying there's a certain candidate who was using Twitter.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, right. I knew about that.
Okay, last question here in the back.
Yeah, Mike Delaney at Ibotta. I just want to dig a little deeper into Jennifer's question on creative format. Thinking mobile specifically, if video is the key vehicle, knowing millennials' attention span is really short. In fact, Columbia School of Psychology said we had an attention span 1 second short of a goldfish. What do you think is the optimal length as you think back to historical TV, knowing that the lengths were a lot longer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I noticed that so I was once described as having the attention span of a mating fruit fly, which might be shorter. I'm not sure exactly where that is on the spectrum. But the shorter can be better, but you also see that longer form, like over 2 minutes, you definitely you're risking something. But you see longer form stuff really hold attention and get great views. And so as a creative guy, I think it's hard for me to say there is a length that's optimal, right? If you can do it in 15 seconds, which I love 15 seconds actually, because it is, if you can be interesting in 15 seconds and get the whole thing done, then go for it. But sometimes ideas that are really, really good are gonna hold people for longer. And they're gonna and they would do something in 2 minutes that they just couldn't do in 15 seconds. There's not another version. One thing we've noticed just with Branzuca, because we have a thing called the Ripper. So a lot of small businesses, one of our assumptions was small businesses have video, right? And we weren't sure if that was true or not. It turned out to be true. But what's not true of small businesses, they don't have 30-second and 15-second video. Their video is in 49 and minute 22 and all sorts of weird shapes and sizes. So we made a thing where they just plug in the URL. It rips it to 30 or 15 for them, and then has a click to learn more button at the end. Those often do better than the things that are designed for 15 and 30, which I think is really interesting because there's something compelling about you just put it in this machine and it just cuts you off, and you got to do something to get to.
Oh, so there's a
to
jump
the end.
page to it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask one wrap-up question?
Sure.
Well, first, my solution is you should market to goldfish, but that's. The last question is, if you could go back and change anything about the business, the way it exists today, what would you change? I mean, if the scorched earth, zero base.
I don't. Give me a little more. What do you mean? Why?
Well, it seems like we kind of backed into these models, and they're not all working that well today. But yeah, it's all some kind of borrowed attention model. But if we had to, if aliens
I wouldn't so
landed
much.
on,
I wouldn't so much change anything. I would just remind people that like you can't change humans. You can't change human nature. So, I started in the business 32 years ago. And I went to a conference. It was sort of like this, Ad Week or Ad Age, and I was a graphic designer. And I was in the conference, and I learned at the conference that print was going to die. And I'm 20 years old. I'm like, fuck, I'm a print designer. Now print's going to die. So I got to learn video. And I thought, how am I going to learn video? Well, I know this guy, Chuck Porter. He's got an agency. I should try to get in his agency, right? And so I basically changed my career. Now, I believe print is still around, right? Yeah. And all these things that are supposed to die off, and they don't. And the battle for our attention, and the fact that not everybody gets our attention. Even back then, we wanted to turn it into math. And more every day, you want to turn it into math. It's like if we just run this algorithm against this group of customers, they'll all pay attention at this level, and this will happen. But it keeps not happening. I suggest it will never happen. I only have 30 years of data, but everyone's always tried to turn this into purely a science, and I don't believe you can turn communications into pure science. Now, the part that you might need to work on to do that is more of the creative side.
Sure.
So when you can use AI to automate the storytelling, then you start to get closer, right? But you're still going to have a human being that's walking around, and they're not. Their main goal in life is not to pay attention to your thing, right? And so there'll always be waste. There'll always be too much. There'll always be consumers that you can't get.
And there'll always be great big ideas that break through, right?
I think there'll always be good ideas. Yeah, I don't see any shortage of really awesome stuff out there. I feel like it's an exciting time to be in it. I wasn't sure what I was going to do. Although I kind of came up with some things with some friends, and we're still playing in the space. Made is an agency that I help launch, and I love the work they do. Humanaut's a little agency in Chattanooga that does amazing work. And I love what they do. So. Yeah, it's not something I can totally leave, or that I want to totally leave. But yeah, ideas matter. But the math matters, and I'm sure that this generation will figure out about as well as the last generation, which was kind of okay.
On that note, kind of okay.
Kind of okay is good enough.
Thank you, Alex.
Fantastic. Hey, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Alex. Big hand for these guys. Thank you, guys. It was great. So with that, I'd like to ask our next.
Full service agency in town. I see people I know. You guys hanging in there? It's snowing, right? Everyone's excited about that? Cool. So today we want to talk about VR and kind of what it means right now and where it could potentially be going. Most of these guys are kind of on the creative and tech side. I sit on the media teams in my company, so we're trying to figure out how do we get these types of things distributed. But that's why these guys are here to kind of walk us through where it's at and what's happening. So I'll let everybody introduce themselves, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. I'm Brian Allen. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Epiphany AI. We're focused primarily on video as a platform and diving into lots of AR and VR opportunities, but we haven't really found anything we've kind of grabbed hold of yet.
Hey, I'm Jesse Jones. I'm on the production side at CPB, where that Alex guy used to work. So I would do a lot of our emerging tech for our clients, and so when someone wants a VR, AR experience, it usually goes through me and my group, and I think we're going to show some things I've produced here so far. So we've done a small handful of VR films, and we'll talk more about those later.
Cool. I'm Kyle Taylor. I'm a partner at Fact and Fiction. 6-month anniversary was yesterday, so we're pretty brand new. Before that, I was SVP of Creative at IMM, who you'll hear from shortly.
Cool, and I think to kick things off, we had a couple of examples. One was from Jesse. Oh, here we go.
There it is.
Monterey Car Week is an event built on history. But because Infiniti doesn't have the same type of heritage, we're still pretty much ignored as a luxury brand. So we shifted the focus to where we're going in the future, and we disrupted the look but don't touch environment with 2 virtual reality experiences.
One experience for the QX30 was we played towards its strengths, which is like it's a very bold design story. In terms of bringing it to life, we thought we would connect with the head designer of Infiniti, and he talks about 2 of the distinguishing lines that sort of were the inspiration for the car itself, and so we took those 2 lines and then built the experience around them.
The 4 stages that we decided to transition through is from pencil to wireframe, to the clay renderings, to the final car, which is the metal with the paint being applied.
The other experience played to the strengths of the coupe, so therefore this was a performance driving experience.
The Dream Road marries live-action footage with CG elements to transport guests from Pebble Beach to the driver's seat of the Q60 concept car.
So we handpicked the most amazing driving roads in the world, and we linked them together into a single dream road that doesn't exist. You can't drive it anywhere except for our simulator.
What we're shooting here is 5 cameras. We've got 3 cameras shooting 220 degrees of the driver's perspective, and then we've got a camera shooting in reverse for the rearview mirrors and for the side mirrors.
It's really important to have a presence of audio that moves around as the user moves around. We do something that's called binaural audio, so we put them in that environment as realistically as possible.
We reached millions more through a Google Cardboard enhanced mobile app and the first ever automotive YouTube 360 ads. And with sales up 26% this year, it's clear that while everyone else reflects on the past, Infiniti is swiftly moving forward.
Awesome, right? Yeah. And then there's one more example we're going to talk about before we totally jumped in. Is that, yep?
Sure.
Okay, here we go.
I don't have a fancy video yet because it's still in progress.
Yeah, sorry for making you watch a case study. They told me it's nice to have some visuals.
No, it's great. Yeah, one of our first clients we're working with is the Evel Knievel Museum, which is opening in 2017. And we don't suggest people jump 18 buses on a motorcycle. So we've created an experience where they can sit down, put on an immersive helmet with Oculus and sound on a Harley XR 750 and see what that experience would be like. So that's probably our most relevant example at Fact and Fiction right now.
Awesome. So as we can see, virtual reality has so much opportunity, and there's some like super cool shit that's available or can happen. I think the thing from the larger consumer perspective, according to eMarketer, as of July, 68% of people in the US hadn't even heard of virtual reality, and 84% hadn't tried it yet. So it is very much a burgeoning market. So that's kind of where we want to kick things off. I'd love to hear from the panel as far as where we feel like things are today with virtual reality, and then maybe into augmented reality, because that's a little bit further along, and then maybe where we see things in the next year to 5 years.
Cool, I'll dive in first. As far as virtual reality, I think, I really don't think we've progressed that much since probably 2007. There's some really good examples of immersive environments that were created back then. I love, my primary example is the Caveman's Crib. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with what that was. It was a Flash-based website with interactive images that led to video. The Caveman's apartment had the capability to knock on the door, get the door opened by some interactive video, interact with the caveman. It was a party scene, so you could pick up some cell phones. The cell phones had video and images in it. There's text messages in it. So it was a complete immersive environment and fully interactive. It's not exactly what I would call VR, and it's not exactly what I would call AR. So I think as we look at that base environment, it's been around for a while, and advertisers, marketers, brand are still trying to figure out how to, I think, grasp hold of one-off environments and then scaling those one-off environments.
Cool. So when we talk about VR, usually I come from a more academic perspective, right? So you know, it's all centered around this concept of immersion, which really means that your brain thinks you're somewhere different than your body is, right? And so when we talk about a VR experience, like you saw that when there's a chair, you can hear it, you can see it, you can feel it. So you had this little moment where you're like, I'm not where I really am. I think one of the best examples, we spent time in like the Stanford VR lab, and it's like the most famous VR case study it is, and where you sort of walk on a beam, and then you get to the end of it, and you have to step down, and like 100% of people fall. You have to be caught. There's mats, everything. So to me, that's true VR, right? Today, from marketing, you know, anytime you kind of slap a phone against your eyeballs, sort of becomes VR because we can sell it that way. And like in my opinion, a sort of a 360 mobile viewer isn't really VR, and we really talk about that's just sort of 360 video. It's you can use the same asset and it's a close cousin, but you know, I don't think anyone's really putting their Samsung gear on and thinking that they're somewhere else when they're sitting there. It's just kind of a cool way to watch videos. So when I think about the state of the industry, I think that, you know, when you really get into virtual reality, you really got to sort of go all in, and someone's got to be somewhere where they're not. Now, because only a small amount of computers and a small amount of hardware can actually do this, we're starting to see a trickle-down effect. I mean, every time you turn on the TV, you're seeing a commercial with someone with this weird headset on it, and it's just kind of a different way to consume it, but it's not exactly the same all the way. So that's kind of my rant that I have to give every time we talk about VR. It's like really immersion makes it reality, not the fact that you can turn your head and see a different camera angle.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the technology is phenomenal. It's there. It's adoption, I think, and hardware constraints, frankly, that make it challenging. I think if you can get someone in a situation where they can experience true VR and be immersed, it's the most powerful medium that exists. But it's also 100% opt-in media. You have to make content worth doing and worth paying attention to. So a few challenges. Technology is not the issue. It's really adoption and hardware. So
I might say that that's probably not the case. I think when you look at mass adoption of VR, and I would like to just kind of step back and say AR and VR are two different things, but mass adoption of VR, none of our cell phones are really capable of that right now. I don't know how many have the S7, but if they haven't burned up, cool. That was, you know, the latest opportunity to kind of do that. The memory on the phones isn't really capable of handling the VR environments, moving from location to location. The graphics on most phones really don't get you there. Some people still have flip phones. So when we talk about moving the market forward at scale, I think maybe technology is a mass barrier at this point, and one-off environments like the Oculus environment or even an immersive environment as a website doesn't get you the reach that you need. So I think we have to cross that boundary at this point.
Yeah, and to go off of that, one more stat to share is that headset penetration this year is projected to be at about 6%. Next year, that'll grow to 15%, hopefully by 2018, 25%. But then for the next 3 or 4 years after that, it's really looking at this point to be estimated to top out at about a third of people. So I think that's an interesting challenge for this industry because it is kind of the topic du jour and it sounds so cool, but I think that's something we as marketers have to remember, that it might remain kind of a niche type of thing to do.
Yeah, if you put a film trailer on YouTube 360 and then you switch to cardboard mode and slap your phone against your face, to me that really isn't VR, right? That's just like a different way to view a video. It's 360 video, and I think that a lot of the people want it to be accessible. Everything else we can do on our phones, but like you said, no one's phone or computer in this room probably can run a real, true virtual reality experience just yet. And I don't think those are going to end up in a lot of living rooms anytime soon.
Yep. So that's a great transition to our next. Go ahead.
I would like to kind of put the perspective on 3D TVs. I don't know what the penetration in the market is on that, but I think it's the same type of thing, right? 3D TVs, I don't know how many of you guys have 3D TVs in the room, but I don't have one. I don't know when I'll get one. I'm not even looking at a curved TV right now, which is the newer, cooler thing, right? So as technology is pushed into the market, I think that's one of the main things that we're looking at as far as adoption, and specifically the environments and how we're doing it. But when you look at 3D versus VR, I think we're going to see the same type of niche. Early adopters, technophile that wants to be on that edge, and I think that we're going to see the majority of the population that doesn't reach that.
Well, just real quickly, just to kind of clarify the way that at least I'm thinking of it, I think home adoption is always going to be a challenge. I think it has great potential for things like gaming, but as far as from a brand side and making content that someone's going to consume in home, I don't know if it's ever going to get there. But the example that Jesse showed for Infinity, being able to take this sort of experience and have it be physical in an unexpected way, I think holds huge potential for brands if you don't think about it as a media channel, but rather a medium to make some content that's going to change the way someone thinks and feels.
Awesome. Cool. So we've kind of laid out that there are pretty obvious differences between VR, AR, 360 video. So let's delve a little bit more into that and kind of define those for the group, because we're going to talk a little bit about that moving forward. But what various levels of augmented reality or virtual reality are available for brands and marketers at this point in time? Like, what are kind of the steps, you know what I mean, like the levels?
I mean, we talk good, better, best, right? You know, when we did that Infinity project, you know, we did it at a car show, right? So when you're in a sled that was tuned in by race car drivers, that's the best. Like you see the car, you get to drive the car, you hear it, you can look around, and then you go to better, which is like kind of an app on your phone and like a Google Cardboard. You can kind of see it. You use your headphones. You get the vibe of it. It's kind of a cool first-person thing. And then the bottom one where we got the mass reach was the YouTube 360 video. And one of the things that actually kills me about this medium is like sort of the better the experience is, the fewer people are going to see it, right? The most people saw our content on YouTube 360, which is kind of the worst way to see it. And then the fewest amount of people got to get into our sled and like have the full in, all out 4K resolution, all that stuff. And so, you know, we're constantly kind of fighting that battle of like getting the reach, but then really making people leave kind of where they are and be somewhere else. And it wasn't just this one, it's sort of been all of our VR projects that we've done so far is like we kind of have this good, better, best. And, you know, on the creative side, it just really kills you to know that we flew to all those countries and we filmed all this stuff. And then now someone's just watching it on YouTube 360 and it's probably kind of crunchy because those videos are, you know, FYI, about 16 times bigger than a regular YouTube video, so they get all crunchy, and then you swipe it around, it just sort of kills you. So right now, you know, we're still in this good, better, best world, but hopefully it'll sort of flip a little bit in the upcoming years.
That's a great point. I don't want to dive too far into that, but looking at lean advertising on video and the creatives that we're producing at this point for mobile, this is like going the other way, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Are you talking about like compression?
Yeah, size of file. I mean, you know, when an advertiser advertises to me on my cell phone, and I think this is a lot of ad blocking, right? I've got to consume the content on my phone. It hits my data rate. If I'm not on Wi-Fi, which, you know, I don't really operate on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth at this point. So, yeah, data's a big thing, and this type of data is prohibitive, I think, like video was when Apple first released FaceTime. It was all Wi-Fi because the networks just couldn't deal with it, and they can't deal with it today.
Got it.
And then an experience like the Pokemon Go phenomenon obviously is augmented reality. So while we're talking mostly about VR today, there is that kind of layer on top of what you're seeing through your phone device, which Alex just said, it's a hard medium to use appropriately too. I think that what's exciting to me about AR is what you can do at shelf, kind of last 3 feet for consumer brands where you have retail and you know that people are using phone to make purchasing decisions. So I think there is opportunity perhaps there to use AR in some meaningful ways in the near future.
So let's dig into that more. What brands are getting it right, or where are opportunities for brands and marketers, either in the AR or even 360 video, and those who are doing VR well, but it's obviously a little bit more limited case there.
I'll dive into that one from an AR perspective. I think let's take it kind of a little differently. Mentioning Pokemon Go, I think that's probably one of the most well-known AR opportunities we've seen. AR has the ability, I think, to affect marketing and branding right now, though, where VR may be a decade in the future. AR is happening right now. There's examples of AR happening in the city here. The city of Parker, south of us, they've just installed 17 beacons into a park in Parker. They're monitoring the beacons 24/7. They watch interaction with all of the toys on the playground. The kids have an app. The app will be delivered in January, so they haven't perfected the delivery of the app, but the app is gamification. The more the kid plays with the slide or whatever it is, the more points they make. They take that into the real market where we talk about that child and obesity. 15% of the children today are obese in the U.S. This gamification and this AR is specifically designed at reducing that. So interacting with brands like McDonald's, where the kid goes into a McDonald's environment, interacting with companies like Ibotta, where if the kid comes in and buys a Happy Meal and they get apples as opposed to fries, they get more points in the gamification. So there's opportunities to align with AR at this point that is I think, way closer and more about the storytelling, right? What's actually going on than what we would see with VR and the opportunity to deliver VR.
Yeah, so to me, brands are doing it right. I'm a creative by nature. So I look at AR and VR as just another medium to tell great stories in meaningful ways. And so I look at brands like Dos Equis that did the 360-degree masquerade, where it's about that brand and what the story and the kind of ethos they've built there. It was phenomenal. And another example would be Mountain Dew, taking relationships, sponsorships with people like Paul Rodriguez and Sean Malto. You're never going to skate with that level of athlete. So being able to put on a virtual reality headset and have that experience, I think ways you can extend brands in meaningful ways that they're already telling these stories are the ones to me that are utilizing the medium correctly.
I guess just doing it right and wrong for each one. Like VR is really about putting someone somewhere where they otherwise couldn't be, right? Skating with someone you like, or driving a car that doesn't exist in a road that's fake. Like, but then the AR side becomes much more about the user. I think it's cool because when you think about how it's the real world merged with this fake world. Everyone knows how to use Snapchat filters. I mean that makes it about me, and like in sort of our millennial culture, if I can put myself into something, or I can put my living room into something, I think that's what makes AR so powerful. It's like it's really about me versus just something that was created by someone else.
Yeah. Well, and then there's the whole future with Magic Leap, and who knows what that's going to be, or I don't even know how many people really know about it. But just seeing some of the initial first looks at what that could do that Google Glass didn't or couldn't with a kind of visual layer, and bringing it not with a weird, goofy headset that you have to put on. There's a ton of kind of that, they call it merged reality, I think, coming down the pipe. So it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's all about execution, though, like you said.
So do you think that there are industries for brands that more naturally lend themselves? I ask because when consumers were asked, the ones that pop for them, and they seem a little bit more obvious, are movies and entertainment, games, travel, music, and sports. So do you think that's too limiting? Because none of those examples were actually in any of those industries.
I think those are the obvious ones.
Right.
I mean, to be able to jump over 18 buses or drive a car at 150 miles an hour, and I think there are some practical applications where it has a ton of potential from a human side. So imagine what you could bring to a children's hospital where there's a kid that can't ever go and ski. It's snowing today for the first time. You could bring an experience like that and be able to connect on an emotional level. So, but as far as brands go, I don't know that I would necessarily disagree with the list that you just called out as being the most obvious.
I read that stat too. I actually really was trying to figure out what are people doing in travel.
Yeah.
And I think, Karen, on that is like when you do this, and when we go to do something like this, it's about, has nothing to do with the category, but about what can that brand do. That was putting you in a car that you couldn't drive. We did something for American Airlines. They have this secret sort of service that most people don't know about, where you sort of go through the back of the airport and get your private security check and really like travel like an A-lister. And so we thought a really cool way to do that was through VR. So sort of the point of the view of this sort of private white glove service through the airport, right? So yeah, it was travel, but it really was about like that brand proving what they could do. We've done stuff for Domino's where it's like we're putting you in, the kitchen, which has nothing to do with that, but it's just like, so it's not really so much about what the category is or what it isn't. It's about, we look at these things as like proof of what the brands are saying. Like virtual reality is, the reality part of it is like, we're really doing this for customers. Like American Airlines really is sort of whisking people through the airport in this way, and the VR kind of proved it in a way without having to buy a really expensive ticket or being a celebrity. And those things that, those cars that you couldn't drive. And so you're sitting at a car show and you're staring at this car, and then someone says, hey, would you you like to take it for a virtual drive, sit in this thing and go. So, the categories though, but then at the same time, naturally speaking, I think that, the bigger ticket items, the ones that you really ponder about, like I really think about what car I'm going to drive, and I really think about, where I want to go on vacation, and some of these tools are a way to sort of put you there without having to do it. You're not going to like, I wonder what that, Alex said Tide, so I'll say that. I wonder what that jug of Tide looks like on my washing machine. I'm going to use an AR app to see if it fits and matches my basement.
See if I can wash my shirt.
Yeah. So I don't think you do that. And then, the last thing is I think that it has nothing to do with categories, but it has to do with kind of where that brand has and where they have foot traffic. We have Hotels.com is one of our clients, and that's in travel. And they've wanted to do virtual reality for like the entire time we've worked with them. But we've never done anything for them because they don't have a world where they just get a lot of traffic. And unless you're at South by Southwest or CES or at a car show or at some of these places where people can walk by and say, hey, I'd like to try that or experience that or see where I can go with your brand, it doesn't make a lot of sense to them, because if you're just pumping this thing out through YouTube or phones, you got to spend a lot of money just to get people to check out what you already just spent a lot of money making.
Yeah, I think one of the most exciting or interesting industries that I want to see where this goes over the next 5 years is entertainment. I think the longest format VR experience that I've found, I could be wrong, is about 25 minutes right now. It was a piece for the NBA Finals last year, just phenomenal. And the thing that you don't think about when you're making one of these interactive films is you have to have an incredible narrative. And you have to be extremely thoughtful, because it's not just you're in an empty space and you're creating your own path, like you're being taken through it. So I'm curious to see who the first one is going to be to do a full-length feature film in the space and what that could be like. And to me, it's the experience, like going somewhere, sitting down, knowing what you're getting into, and being able to experience it correctly.
All right, I got something to say about that. Okay, sorry. So I was the same way, right? The first time I ever did VR, I was like, this is going to be awesome. This is how I want to watch every movie for the rest of my life. And then we started testing that thing, and I remember like, VR is really hard on your brain. Yeah. And I remember we had the racing sled and we had the drives, and I was one of the testers, and the second those things didn't match up, you kind of got sick. And VR has been around a long time, and the reason now the Oculus was the first people to really get it right, where they could keep up the frame rate where you turn your head and the camera turned at such a speed that your brain didn't have a lag and would make you dizzy. And so I'm going somewhere with this, but we were at the VR lab in Stanford, and I actually said something myself, I can't wait till someone makes a movie. And the guy's like, there's no way. And he tells me this story about how these guys do these sports training things for NFL quarterbacks and college quarterbacks. And maybe you've seen this on SportsCenter, but the example they gave was Carson Palmer, like a massively competitive person who's trying to do everything he possibly can to get ahead of his game. And so he has a VR headset where he sees the opposing defense every week. They film things, and then he goes through scenarios. But he said, to this date, he's never done it for more than 10 minutes. Because after that, it just you start to just fall apart, and you can't see things, and you get dizzy, and it doesn't make any sense to you. And so like as you do it, I've had that happen too. You get a little bit too far in, and you're like, I got to get out. So from my perspective, it's like I don't think that there's a world anytime in the near future where people are going to be sitting in their basement watching the next Star Wars movie in a VR headset. I just don't see it. There's too many talented directors and filmmakers sort of placing the camera and creating their craft that they're just going to shoot it in 360 and kind of put you in that world. I think movie trailers will always be in VR, and sort of the bonus content. You'll watch Game of Thrones, then here's a way to kind of go see, virtually climb the wall. We've seen that VR experience, but I just don't know if, I can't foresee anything in the near future of like people doing this more than 10 minutes max. And like, it's funny, like the NFL quarterbacks can't even do it for longer than that. And so someone's going to do it for their own entertainment, and these guys are getting paid a lot to go out there. All right. Long answer.
So is that like this is like the version of like we can't go over 60 miles per hour or we'll all die?
Yes, I think people's brains will melt if you are in some sort of virtual world for too long. I don't know. I mean, that's been my experience. I've looked at a lot of these things. Maybe it is.
Yeah, just curious, how many people in the room have done a VR experience? It's maybe like 30, 40%.
And we're like the people who like get to access to them relatively.
I highly suggest the Everest one if you ever get a chance, because that one's rad. That's my all-time favorite as of like 10 days ago.
Yeah, so I'd make a final point to that I think more short-form content, right, which is the way content's going anyway. There's not an ability to, like we've worked with a partner that's working with NASA images, the NASA environment, but there's no way to move you from one environment to the other. Like I can't go from my crater to the next environment in these environments. I think also it points to probably a couple of opportunities, right? Entertainment, of course. I'd love to sit backstage and watch a concert in 360 just from backstage. I think everybody has that desire. Sitting inside of a race car, maybe for 10 laps, would be cool. But taking this environment and setting it in a Ford dealership where they're letting me run through the F-150 or the F-250 or whatever it may be in situations really makes sense to me. In short form instances where it truly is immersive, right? You've got the ability to demonstrate kind of the things you want in the vehicle with movement based on the sled you're in. And then the rest of the senses that you're contributing, right? So I think that's really where most of the opportunities will be, is in short form, and maybe the automotive dealership would be the first place that I would say you really see that experience where it's available at a mass scale.
So let's talk for a quick minute, since we've kind of gotten into the content side of things. What are things, since you guys all have experience, that the greater world should be aware of as far as the narrative or even the production logistics, or just kind of those back end things, both from the creative direction, but also like one of you guys was talking about, like it takes up a shit ton of memory and you need to buy a bigger server or whatever.
Yeah, well, it looked like you guys shot the stuff on red cams. I mean,
yeah, that was a huge mistake. That was a huge.
I was gonna
that
ask
was
you about
so
that.
much footage that we had people in Hong Kong. I was like, do I mail it to you? Like, I mean, it was weird. Like all of our normal sort of pipes that connect like a global agency all of a sudden didn't work, and so I don't know. I mean,
there are a lot of things that you don't even really think of until you're in it. You can't have clients really on set. You're in a 360-degree environment. You can't even really have directors on set physically. Like there are so many things that from an agency side that make clients super uncomfortable. Like you have to have such badass clients to do this type of work that trust you with the utmost level of respect to be able to pull this off, because it's not like anything else that you would shoot.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, like, from production, we like, oh, cool, we got a camera here, and then we just sort of combine them together, and then I realized, well, my creative directors, like, they hated it because we shot stuff off of a car, and then I was like, well, and they want to say, did we get that shot? And I'm like, well, which camera do you want to watch? And then all of a sudden you realize like 7 cameras for 90 seconds, and then you have this infinite math problem of all these different shots that go together. So we started out saying, to produce VR film, you're going to pay 20% more on the shoot, 20% more on data management, 20% more on this, and then we did our next one, and it was going to be in a hotel room, and then we realized, wow, we went from here to shooting all the way around, and then we're like, we have to get everybody set up in the hotel room next door, and that's where the video goes. So then we go, okay, it's going to be about 30% more, and then we just did our last one. We're like, okay, guys, you should plan on paying about 50% more than you would for a normal thing, and then
for 10% of the people to see that they typically would.
And then you go you make these things, you're like, oh, cool, a client over in Nashville, like, you should check this out. Like, cool, how do I do that?
So I got a question for you. What did your KPI look like for this auto thing?
I think that without getting super nerdy in it, but like, this was at the Pebble Beach Auto Show, and it's a classic auto show, and so Infinity's a new brand. So when you're Cadillac, you whip out your first ever Cadillac, and your BMW, you whip out the first, X Series. And so we didn't have that in our role, so we brought in all of our future cars, right, that nobody ever seen. And so I don't know how to like measure VR thing against seeing the first ever Corvette for an auto enthusiast. You know what I'm saying? It's still sort of a competition of brands trying to kind of stand out, and it's a very small car show. But what I can say is that when we distribute the content through the apps and the YouTube 360s, it blew it away, because it was a new thing. It was something where YouTube was like, couldn't wait to feature this because it was the new thing. It was the first ever automotive. We were like 2 days away from being the first ever 360 ad, but it was like the second one. But so we have to say first automotive. But so because of that, it actually kind of jump-started it. But I would consider it a smashing success, because it's people that were fans of the brand that went up to our pavilion and wanted to spend time and check out our cars as a way to do it that maybe they hadn't done before.
Yeah, well, KPI was probably one creatives love best, which is giving people something.
By the way, what's a KPI anyway?
It's an experience worth talking about and paying attention to. I mean, that's what we're trying to do with Evel Knievel. It has, they're going to have the most famous bikes, helmets, all this memorabilia from an American icon, and people are lined up to ride this bike.
How do you measure making you love something you already love even more?
Yeah, so it's
brand
squishy.
warmth.
It's not.
Yes.
Cool. To add one more thing, there's actually a pretty recent Nielsen study that's come out that's trying to measure the engagement with VR, and obviously it's through the roof comparatively. But one of the challenges that they found that I just want to share with the group, if anyone is starting to delve into this world, is that in a VR world, you have to guide people with audio and visual clues so they know where to look, because they were finding that in certain experiences people were getting kind of lost in a sense, where maybe a character was walking up to another character, and the VR people, it was a comparison of linear TV, 360, and VR, and the VR people totally missed it sometimes. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Well, that's another thing you don't think about is how important sound is. You have a left and a right channel, front and back, just like you do visually, and I think a lot of times that gets missed, and these experiences just leads to that problem.
Cool. So one last question, since we're running out of time here. If for obviously VR, pretty niche still, maybe still a little bit in the future for most people. If mostly media folks out here are trying to take something back to their agency, hopefully to their creative counterparts on where to start, if they're just maybe starting to look at 360 video or maybe an AR sort of initiative, what are some tips or like takeaways that you could send them with?
Definitely 360 would be my primary go-to at this point, just because of distribution and reach.
Yeah, and I would I'd say the same thing, but I would say look at it from good, better, best, right? I think, McDonald's did some pretty crazy stuff at South by Southwest last year. It was like the VR house, and so that was great. But then they also figured out a way to like tell that story through PR, and then tell that story through a 360 video, and then kind of repackage it and set it up, and know that it's not going to be the better it is, the fewer people see it. I think that to me is the biggest key takeaway, and I also think you got to look at brands and does this brand have something to prove? Like, we say we're the best. We say this is how we make our tequila. Let's put somebody in our factory and let them see it. So I think it's like the proof of it. Like, not, we look at TV a lot of times like telling story or long form content. I think VR and AR right now is really just proving what you're saying in a lot of those other mediums. And so I think, and when we use it that way, it's worked very well. When we try to get people to kick their feet up and do like a lean back experience and just sort of enjoy the show, it maybe has fallen a little bit on deaf ears.
Yeah, I would say the lack of penetration or adoption is kind of, there's a silver lining to that right now, like today. Maybe not 5 years, but if you have the right teams and the right clients, you still have that chance to be kind of that first experience, right? And to kind of blow people's minds for the first time. So while it might not have that mass reach, if you have a creative team that can come up with an idea worth paying attention to, you can still be that one that they always talk about and remember. So
yeah, these things get bundled. When you get them on YouTube, people make their playlists of different things, because once you sort of use your Google Cardboard and you watch one thing, like you want to watch another one, and like it isn't like we're just recommending things over and over. There isn't that much good 360 or cardboard friendly content out there. So if you can sort of insert yourself into sort of that consumer journey, you're going to get a lot of sort of proximity impressions.
Yeah, even just dipping your feet into it, really short form stuff. I would say that the opportunity right now is to fail in front of a smaller audience. We're all going to fail at this multiple times, so failing in front of a smaller audience, using that as a test, and really figuring out what's going to happen in the next couple of years with both AR and VR.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I think we're out of time. If anybody has questions, we'll stick around here for a couple minutes during this coffee break. But thank you guys so much. I think we all really appreciate it.
Can we get one question? Yeah, can we do one question real quick?
I don't care.
Thanks. Just one question.
Sean Baker from IMM. So I think, great job. Thanks guys. If I'm a brand, I'm thinking this is for like highly considered purchases, things like that, where you need to experience. But if I'm a brand that is a destination brand or experience-based brand, do you guys see a danger point in the future where this experience gets so prolific and so good that it actually co-ops or cannibalizes what I would consider my business?
I don't think so. I think what you're going to see is an opening of a new business model, maybe. Virtual touring's coming. How you manage your virtual identity is going to be a thing for locations as opposed to people at this point. I think that would be more logical of how to manage this. The people that can afford to go to locations are going to locations. If I can go to Bali, I'm going to Bali. Putting the Oculus on really doesn't get my feet wet.
I don't know. I disagree because we do a lot of car shows that have like ride and drive, and so our creative brief will be like, get people excited about this car, and then next thing you know, someone's got a VR idea, and then at some point we stop and say, man, wouldn't it just be better to put them in the real car? And same with even your example about showrooms. Like at some point, just get in the real car and take it for a drive on a real road, because that's ultimately what you're considering. And so that's why concept cars you can't drive. Yes, the F-150. We probably got one out on the lot. Like go take it for a ride. So I think that. Yeah, I think it's more about the fantasy, the aspirational stuff, and when we start talking about practical experiences, there's probably better ways of doing it versus sort of giving them the fantasy version.
Yeah, agree. We've made a business decision not to put the Evel Knievel footage out in 360 video because we want people to get in their car and drive to the museum and experience what we believe is the best experience they're going to get with that. So I think that. Smart.
Okay, great. Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, panel. Thanks, guys. Come around. Thank you. So we're at a coffee